These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground. And the Lord God formed a man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. These verses that we have just read are from Genesis chapter 2, and they give us information that is very, very helpful in knowing how it all came about. And it is all laid out for us here by God. He is the one who gives us detail that we wouldn't know about from any other source. And because this is in the Bible, it is absolutely true and trustworthy. Now, once God had planted the fields, and once God had brought some water to this earth, and had actually created the earth, then He created the crown of His creation, mankind. We read in verse 7 of Genesis chapter 2, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Notice that it was the Lord God. He is the Lord of all the earth. And notice that one of the first things that He created was moisture, because you can't have life of any kind without moisture. It wasn't rain. It was a mist of some kind, but it was sufficient to keep man alive and keep the plants that He created and was able to stay alive because there was the breath of life. And then it goes on in verse 8 of Genesis 2, and the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there He put the man whom He had formed. Now, we don't know where Eden was, but this garden is going to be a special place where He can nurture the first parents, the first family, and prepare the whole world for mankind, as well as the creation of the animals and so on. Because we go on in verse 9 of chapter 2, and out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. First word that becomes a little bit anxious for us, good and evil. But ahead of that, it talks about the creation, that it was a wonderful creation. He created that which was good, that was good for just to look at, as well as good to eat and gain strength from, and so on. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden we read about. My, God made provision for everything. And then He said in verse 10, and a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. Now, this is very curious information, but it does tell us that right from the beginning God had a deep concern that what He has created would continue to exist, and it required water. And so water was one of the first things He created. It was a mist to begin with, and then the next thing there is a river, we read in verse 10. and it is divided into 4 heads. That is, it develops into 4 separate streams going in different directions in order to encompass all the areas that God wanted to bring water to. The name of the first place where the stream went was Pison, or Pison. That is, it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. Now, that's an interesting insertion here, that there is gold there, because gold is a precious metal. It's a precious metal all through the Bible. It's a precious metal in any land today. It is something that God makes reference to right at the beginning, that He is the one that specifically created it. And later on, when we go through the Bible, we can find various references as to where gold was used and when it was used and how valuable it really became. And the gold of the land is good. Yes, it is good in itself. But later on, as we know, gold became a real problem to mankind. It's a real problem to mankind in our day. But it was created by God. And then he goes off and speaks about 4 other metals. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. Have you ever seen bdellium? I don't know what that is, but it was a very precious metal of some kind that laid alongside gold. And the onyx stone, again, is a precious metal. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. We understand the word Ethiopia, but we must remember that here it is first used by God Himself, and later on mankind saw that word and named a whole race of people as Ethiopians, because everything begins with God. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel. Now again, we don't know anything about Hiddekel, but God did have a land named Hiddekel. That is it which goeth toward the east of Assyria. Oh, Assyria is a name we're familiar with. That later on was picked up by mankind and assigned to a big land, the whole land of Assyria. And the fourth is Euphrates. Now, Euphrates also is a word that we're quite familiar with. These 4 rivers are noted by God because they are all very important in God's creation program. And the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. Ooh, now we have something other. We have looked at 4 rivers that we know very little about, except that the names of those rivers were originally given by God and then later on were taken by man. But now we come to the creation of man. And the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it. Where's that? Well, God doesn't tell us where that is either. We don't know. We know where Euphrates was, the river Euphrates, because later on there was a river named Euphrates, and so probably that could have been the same river. But when we talk about Eden, we don't know of a land of Eden in the world. We use it as a quick reference to something that is very beautiful or very wholesome, like a land of Eden. But it was a land that God created in this world, and there He assigned man his task. He did not create mankind just to have a good time on this earth, just to kind of float around and look at the animals. No way. God created man because he had work for them to do. So he planted a garden, a beautiful garden, and he named that garden Eden, and he assigned mankind to dress and to keep it. In other words, it came under the tasks that God first gave mankind. And so as we look at this whole business of creation, we see that it was step by step, but that mankind fits very definitely into it. And as we go along, we're going to see more and more how mankind fits into it. And then we're going to begin to compare with what has happened ever since then, right to the present day. But right now, that's as far as we're going to go with this study.